Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Ygartua Art Chronicles podcast with me, Ed Hoskin, exploring the amazing life and career of Paul Ygartua. This week, we set off to the south of France, to Cannes, on a trip that was to be repeated for years to come. We'll start by talking more about the plexiglass method with Paul.
I worked with it for quite a while.
Yeah, for about.
But then I was wearing a mask, and the sprays. A lot of the sprays were not acrylic, and so I was really taking it, not a chance, but it was just it wasn't so good for your health. You know what I mean? With a mask on.
But you were outside as well, weren't you?
Straight.
You were outside.
Even outside, but still the smells there.
But before you sort of realized this is about. Throughout the 90s, you were doing the plexiglass.
Not as much as I probably could have done, but because
and the samurai
warriors,
became
I did
great
lots.
Subject.
Oh, sure, they were selling great, and of course I kept doing it because they were selling good,
Yeah.
But still, they were. But Joanne was always worried because when I came home, she said I looked drunk, and it was nothing to do with the drunk.
Yeah.
It was just the smells of this. It's like you're getting high. I was getting high on the smell. Sometimes,
Yeah.
And also they're pretty, but we did as starting off in 87 and probably straight through to the end of the 90s, you were doing plexi were not done every week, but maybe in a month you might do two big ones. We picked up that book in Hawaii.
That's right.
With the samurais.
And that's when I did lots of samurai warriors.
It's crazy. They were so popular, the samurais.
It was really popular.
In the same period, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'd have a double 8 foot by 4 feet, but in two pieces.
Wow.
It's just like the samurai that we kept, the one in our hallway, and that's in pieces, but how big is that?
That's 7 foot by 6 foot.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite spectacular.
So how did that... I think we talked about this a bit last time, the technical method of it. But why don't you just recap as to what your process was? Because it's fairly involved. That's probably why it's more expensive, I suppose, as well.
Because it was it's sort of complicated as well because of course I'm working reverse painting, so I'm working on a sheet of plexiglass. I'm actually drawing my design out on a frisket, which is like a sheet of frisket stuck to the plexiglass. And then what I do is I cut out a silver line throughout the design with the double blades and paint that in silver. So it's like inlaid silver. Around all the subject matter, there's this very fine silver line.
Yeah.
A little bit like cloisonné enamel, I did cloisonné when I was at college. And so I got the idea from that to use that part of the experiment, And then you work against the silver, against the lines you paint by peeling areas off and spraying, and then using a lot of base cover to cover them up. So it's a lot of protective stuff, a lot of retouching, a lot of repainting, and it's a slow process. And you don't know what the end product's going to look like because once it's painted on the plexi, you can't get it off.
Yeah.
So a lot of the effects are permanent. That's it. And if you've got a mistake in there, it stays. That's about it.
But there's no mistake in art, right?
No, there's no mistake.
But they're really exquisite.
I charge extra for the mistakes. Yeah.
They're exquisite, and people were fascinated. And what's very interesting is that you come in quick with your spray, and then you come in again and again, and you end up with about 3 or 4
different layers of paint.
Yeah.
So your under layer could be one quick spray of a color, and because you can still see through it, you can go over it with a darker color or any color, and it changes the color, so you can get really interesting effects.
You also must have had a whole. You must have had a whole range of colours as well, because you can't mix like on a palette with paints. You can't. You have to sort
That's
of.
Right. You can't get these colours. Some of the colours I was working with, you just can't find in paint. It has to be a spray, and then what I'd do sometimes is I'd spray on top of it terps, and the terps would separate the paint, and then you'd have lots of gaps and dots and textures, and you could almost make texture on the actual plexiglass. So,
Yeah.
and then you fill it in again with white paint or something else, and then that fills in all the little gaps. So you end up with a real mixture of texture and colour and shading, and yeah, it's quite a fascinating.
So it's
technique.
not just flat.
It's almost impossible to copy.
Right, yeah, and it's not just flat areas of. It's not like a.
No, it's not flat areas.
It's not like cut
at all.
out pieces of paper. It's actually there's a lot more texture than you would imagine from spray paint.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like the terps is interesting.
And if you wanted it to be a flat colour, you'd have to basically paint 4 or 5 coats to make sure nothing would show through. You know what I mean? So yeah, it kind of, once you learn how to do it, then it's a lot easier. But to begin with, I mean, you mess up a lot of. I messed up a lot of experimenting. You know.
I doubt it, Paul.
What do you mean you doubt it? Of course.
I like the mess ups.
She
I
likes
think
the
they're
messes, yeah,
amazing.
she thinks the
I like
messes-
it when things aren't always perfect. You know,
True.
like-
Did you have to bin some then?
Uh,
Did you chuck some in the bin or not?
No.
I
Never.
don't think I
He's
maybe
never
a couple,
been one thing in his
I
life.
don't know. Maybe.
Really?
I don't know. Can't remember.
No way.
Can't remember.
No,
Joanne would keep it anyway. She wouldn't throw
That's
anything
right.
out.
No canvas, nothing has ever been thrown. But Paul also very fortunate that physically he's fit and he's very fast. Because I'm not sure how that would work if you took forever doing that. You know what I mean? Trying to make up your mind what colors. And
Yeah, they took longer. They
Spontaneous.
took a lot longer then, did they? I mean, how much? Like 5 times longer to do one of those? As opposed to...
Probably 3
8
times.
hours?
Yeah.
8 hours. Sometimes 2 days of 8 hours a day.
yeah.
Yeah, 'cause stuff's
And
got
you
to
had to
dry.
wait till you had to wait till certain areas dried before you could go in again. And it was a lot of, and you had to be very careful it didn't run, because if it ran, it could run over to the next area that you didn't want it to. You know what I mean? So you had to be really a lot of masking, a lot of being very careful with the paint sprays.
And well, we were shipping these. Actually, so at that time we're still only for another year, I think, with the Hawaii gallery, and then now we've got Montreal, Quebec, and Ottawa, and they are taking plexi.
That's right.
But you did different sizes.
Yeah,
you did
I
large
did a lot
and
of plexi, yeah.
different sizes,
I
and
remember-
Great West also,
That's right,
Vancouver Island.
And that's right. Great.
And
So,
as you said before, difficult to ship. I mean, much more difficult to ship.
Oh my God! It
Well,
was
they have to
very.
be professional.
Luckily,
Yeah.
only one got broken, and I don't know what happened to it, but they sent me a photograph of it, and someone had speared the package. So they speared it like,
Wow, probably
and
something
it must
fell
have-
into it.
and the painting had like a hole in the center, and all this like
Shatter
shattered area. Yeah, it didn't fall apart. It was just all these lines of
God.
streaks of broken parts.
Well,
you know.
actually, the Federation of Artists also gave you an honorable mention with one of your plexiglass
Okay, yeah,
paintings.
that's right.
Yeah, so
Oh,
they-
yeah.
you
Yes,
know,
I
they
mentioned
like
it, yeah.
something that's different. But we did and UBC, your Artist of the Year that year.
Yeah.
And then we also did Geneva Language Institute, Mr. Janus, who we put in the Guinness Book of
Oh,
Records.
yes. Yeah.
45 languages.
Yeah.
So we had a show at his school.
That's right. We did a
Yeah,
show.
we would do, actually, like, later we also did a show at the ballet school. Paul did ballet studies. Sometimes over the years people would say, oh, could you do a show at our place? And then we invite all the parents.
yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
It's, Paul can do any subject, so.
Then we went to Carmel.
Oh, yeah, so we had Christmas in Vancouver.
We had Christmas in Vancouver, and then we left straight afterwards
Monterey.
to go to Monterey and Carmel with the kids.
Well, the kids, they're used to the coming and going. So, hey, kids, how about New Year's down in California?
Sounds good.
Okay, well, that's right.
Yeah.
And we find this amazing Italian restaurant right on the waterfront there.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And
Talk about luxury.
So the guys, there was all this brass everywhere, brass railing, and the waiters had their
It was
black
on a
dicky.
cliff looking down onto this beautiful beach through the window right in front of us.
The waiters had white gloves, which you
Yeah,
never see,
white
and
gloves.
black dicky bows, and the kids love it all.
Kids
that.
were impressed with white gloves. So we left the restaurant and opened the windows, and everyone
Of the car.
screaming out the window.
in the car.
Happy New Year, Happy New Year.
Yeah. Let's scream, kids, Happy New Year. Yeah, too much fun. We used to always say, too much fun. Which it was. Yeah, and for us always.
So we headed up the coast.
Well, no, then you went to Carmel.
We drove all the way up the coast road till we get to this cave. What was it called?
Yeah.
The Seal Cave.
Yeah, the seal.
Where they have an elevator that takes you down about 200 foot
Yeah.
into this massive cave. And it's full. There must be 50 or 60 seals and massive big animals down there, all getting fed, I guess, with the fish they feed them, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. You felt you were right.
Oh, you felt you were in there with
Well, they
them.
had the big glass.
Big glass window.
Windows, yeah.
Like an aquarium. You're sitting in, looking at them.
We'll take a break there and skip forward a bit to the Chemainus touch-ups during the spring of '89. This was after spending the summer of '88 in Europe and cousin Rosie coming to live in Vancouver for 8 months.
Oh, yeah, then Chemainus calls up.
Then
Chemainus calls you up.
And said that the mural, there seems to be a problem with it. And what's happened is the cement block that I painted on was leaching lime. So it was leaching lime through the surface and running down over the faces and everything.
Oh.
So they said, "Oh, could you come and repaint it? Sort of like touch up and clean it up."
Because this is 6 years later.
This was 6 years later.
And my father at the time said,
Yeah.
it's too soon.
They should have waited longer for this cement
But I think
to
because
set
it was
before I painted on it.
the tourist
Yeah.
season and that.
It wasn't the parts I painted that were leaching lime. It was above the paint.
Yeah,
There was
dripping
a part
down.
at the top that was concrete without being painted on or like primary. You know what I mean? There's no primer on it.
Yeah.
And that was what was leaching the lime. And so it was running down over the faces. I mean, I washed a lot off, but then I had to paint up and touch up quite a bit of it as well, you know.
Yeah.
So then there I was working there with a ladder and a scaffolding that they'd put there. I had a 20-foot ladder.
You didn't have your
we had both.
a cherry picker.
No, they didn't get a cherry picker because it was only going to be a 2-3 day job, 2-day job.
And we also coordinated with Great West.
And we coordinated
to
with
do
the Great
a one-man show.
To do a one-man show at the same time.
And the
which
kids
was
and
good.
Rosie were with us.
So everybody was there together.
And they had a couple of days out of school.
Okay.
So I just about finished what I was doing, and I said, "Oh, it looks like one thing." Just Joanne noticed that the face at the top, there was a little bit of a drip on the side of her face.
Yeah.
She said, "You have to go correct that." I said, "Okay, I better get."
Well, obviously it's a drip running down the side of her face.
It's your fault. Anyway,
Yeah, I was going to say, he's blaming you already. Yeah, I can feel it coming.
So I climbed up the ladder. I was right at the top of the 20-foot, touching it up, and suddenly, snap, the ladder broke right in the middle underneath me. And so rather than
feet.
falling down with the ladder, which could have speared me or anything, I jumped trying to reach the scaffolding because it was about...
Normally you would have got it.
It was about 4 or 5 feet away. But as I jumped away, of course, the ladder moved the other direction and I just fell in between. So I landed on my...
you hit that little
I hit a ledge at the bottom and then my heel drove into the concrete at the bottom.
Aye.
So that crushed my heel completely.
Completely shattered.
And fractured my spine.
Ooh.
So I ended up in the hospital there.
Well, first of all, though, Paul.
What first?
The children.
Oh, the children.
Gosh.
Tala came up and said, "Is he going to die? Is he going to die?"
Oh, well,
I
he
said,
was
"No,
he was great.
I said, "I'm not going to die, Tala."
He was grey white, but he was conscious.
You were
I must have been grey white.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then fortunately,
I didn't bang my head or anything, just my back and my foot.
There was some locals that took Rosie and the children over for a cup of tea, just to keep them occupied, not to worry about their father. And then I'm thinking immediately about the general hospital because you can fly people out just over, right? And I'm thinking, I don't want him in a local hospital because it's pretty small. We need the very best for